The forest was silent, save for the soft rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a distant twig. Lucas, a skilled human explorer, moved cautiously through the dense underbrush of the alien world. His mission was simple: collect rare resources from the planet's uncharted regions. The thrill of exploring a new world always made his heart race, but today, something felt different. The sky above was an endless expanse of deep purple, and the air was thick with the scent of strange flowers and plants. Giant trees, their trunks twisting like serpents, towered high above him, casting long shadows across the ground. This planet, though beautiful, was far from peaceful. He had heard the stories of hunters lurking in the shadows, predators who made the wilds their home. As Lucas carefully made his way deeper into the forest, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He felt a presence, something watching him, moving just out of sight. He paused, his breath shallow, and surveyed the area, but all he could see were the strange trees and the flicker of movement in the underbrush. Suddenly, a massive form dropped from a tree above him, landing with a thunderous crash. Lucas barely had time to react. Before he could even raise his weapon, something large and strong pinned him to the ground. A sharp gasp escaped his lips as he found himself staring up into the glowing eyes of an alien creature. The creature was enormous, at least 12 feet tall, with a sleek, muscular build and skin that shimmered in the dim light. Its body was covered in markings that seemed to glow faintly, adding to its intimidating presence. The alien's long arms were like iron bands, holding Lucas firmly in place, and its large, elongated face was filled with an expression that could only be described as curious. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Lucas's mind raced. This was not the creature he had expected to encounter. The stories of the deadly hunters had made him think he would be facing an enemy that sought only to kill. But this alien didn't seem to want to harm him. At least, not yet. The alien's mouth moved, but the words were foreign to Lucas. He had no idea what it was saying. The creature tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing as it seemed to study him. Then, to Lucas's shock, it spoke in a language he couldn't understand. Yet somehow the words felt oddly familiar. "You nest with me?" it asked in a strange melodic tone. Lucas's mind struggled to comprehend the situation. Nest? What was she talking about? His heart pounded in his chest, his eyes darting around in panic. Was this some sort of alien mating ritual? Was he about to become prey in a way he couldn't possibly imagine? The creature tilted her head again, her piercing eyes searching his face. "Nesting, survival," she said, as though trying to explain. "You help?" Lucas's brain scrambled to understand. It took a few moments before the fog began to lift, and he realized that this wasn't a threat of violence. It was something entirely different. The alien, for reasons he didn't fully understand, had decided to approach him not as an enemy but as an equal, or at least someone she wanted to test. Perhaps it was some sort of alien tradition, or maybe a strange form of diplomacy. The alien's glowing eyes softened, her posture shifting slightly as if she were reconsidering the situation. She still held him tightly, but her grip was no longer suffocating. Her expression seemed to change too, from one of cold calculation to something more curious. Lucas swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. "What do you want from me?" For a long moment, the alien didn't respond. Instead, she simply stared at him with an intensity that made Lucas feel like she was reading his very thoughts. It was as if she were trying to understand the human before her, a creature so small and fragile compared to her own kind. Then, without warning, she released her hold on him. Lucas gasped for air, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He tried to push himself to his feet, but before he could, The alien's large hand was gently placed on his chest, holding him in place. She didn't seem aggressive, but there was no denying the power in her touch. The alien spoke again, her voice calm yet firm. "I am Thyssara," she said, the name carrying a sense of authority and purpose. "You, human, I seek understanding. Will you nest with me?" Lucas blinked, completely caught off guard by her words. "Nesting," he repeated, still trying to make sense of it all. "What does that mean?" The Thyssara's glowing eyes dimmed slightly, and she crouched down beside him, her gaze softening. "Nesting means survival," she explained, her voice more measured now. "My kind. We need new blood. A partner. I seek you, human, because you are different, strong, resilient." Lucas could barely keep up with the flood of information. This alien, this hunter who had pinned him to the ground, wasn't trying to kill him or take him as a trophy. She wasn't even threatening him in the way he had feared. Instead, she was offering something entirely different, an opportunity to help, to survive together. For the first time since their encounter began, Lucas felt a sense of relief. The fear was still there, lingering in the back of his mind, but it was now mingled with confusion and curiosity. This was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he couldn't deny that something about the alien's presence was both intimidating and fascinating. As they stared at each other, a strange bond seemed to form between them. The forest around them fell quiet once more, as if the world itself was waiting for Lucas's answer. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lucas spoke, his voice steady but uncertain. "I don't understand," he said, "but I'll try. I'll help. Just tell me what I need to do." The Thyssara's eyes brightened, and for the first time, Lucas saw what could only be described as a smile form on her face. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it told him everything he needed to know. He had made the right choice. "Good," she said, standing tall once more. "We begin then." Lucas stood slowly, his legs still trembling slightly from the force with which the alien had pinned him down. His mind was still racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A giant 12-foot alien had appeared out of nowhere, knocked him to the ground, and then asked him to nest. He was used to danger. He'd faced hostile environments and strange creatures before. But this was different. This was something he had never imagined. The alien, Thyssara, stood nearby, watching him with her glowing eyes. Her presence was both intimidating and strangely magnetic. Even though she was clearly powerful and far more advanced than him, there was an odd sense of calm in the air. For a moment, it almost felt like they were equals. "What do you mean by nesting?" Lucas asked, still trying to grasp the full meaning of the word. "Why me?" Thyssara didn't immediately respond. Instead, she tilted her head, as though contemplating his question. Her glowing eyes seemed to flicker with an unreadable emotion before she spoke again. "Nesting is what my kind does to survive. My species. We are in danger. Our numbers are few. The land we live on is dying. We need partners to continue, to grow." Lucas blinked, his confusion deepening. He didn't know what to make of the situation. Was this some kind of trick? Was she trying to manipulate him somehow? He felt a surge of doubt, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding. The Thyssara continued, her voice softer now. "I know you don't understand. I have never met a human before. But I know you have strength. And I need that strength." She took a step closer, her towering form intimidating, but not threatening. "In return, I offer my help. My people are dying. We need your kind's resilience." Lucas looked up at her, studying her face. The alien's words didn't make sense in a traditional way, but there was sincerity in her voice. She wasn't asking him to fight her or to submit. She was asking for something deeper, something more profound. "I'm not a scientist or a healer," Lucas said, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know how I can help." Thysaira's eyes softened and she crouched down beside him. "You don't need to be a healer. You only need to survive. My people have relied on hunting, but now there is nothing left. The animals we once relied on are gone, and the land we call home is dying. The humans, you are different. You have the ability to adapt, to grow, to thrive. That's why I chose you." Her words echoed in his mind. He couldn't deny the power of what she was saying. Humanity, with all its flaws and struggles, had a resilience that no alien species could ignore. But to be part of something like this, to become a part of her species' future, it felt overwhelming. Thysaira watched him carefully, as if reading his every thought. "You may not understand it now," she continued, "but you will. I need you, to nest with me, to help me rebuild." Lucas took a step back, still unsure of what to do. "And if I don't agree? What happens then?" There was no anger in Thysaira's eyes, no malice, just an unreadable calm. "Then you leave. The choice is yours, human. But if you leave, you will never understand. You will never know what could have been." For a moment, there was silence between them. The weight of her words hung in the air like a thick fog. Lucas was torn. Part of him wanted to run. This was all so strange, so alien. But another part of him couldn't help but feel a strange connection to her, to the plight of her species. There was a deep sadness in her eyes, one that spoke of a struggle he couldn't fully comprehend. Finally, he spoke. "I'll stay," he said, his voice steady now. "But I still don't understand. What exactly do you want me to do?" Thysaira's eyes gleamed with what might have been hope. "We must begin by learning from each other. I will show you the land, and you will show me your strength. Your kind has survived through ingenuity. We need that." She stood tall, extending one long, powerful arm toward him. Lucas took a deep breath before taking her hand. Her grip was strong, but not painful. There was something gentle in the way she held him. Together they moved through the forest, the dense trees parting as they walked. The alien terrain was unlike anything Lucas had seen before. Strange creatures fluttered in the sky, their wings glistening with a strange iridescence, while the ground was covered in thick vines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "This is my world," Thysaira said, her voice echoing softly as they moved through the dense foliage. "Once, we thrived here. We hunted, we survived. But now, the world is changing, the creatures are gone, and the land is dying." They reached a clearing, and Lucas looked around in awe. The landscape was vast and beautiful, with towering rock formations and strange plants that seemed to glow in the dim light. But beneath the beauty, there was a sadness that permeated everything. Thysaira turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with an intensity that Lucas had never seen before. "You must understand. If we do not change, we will perish. My people cannot continue to live as we have. We need something new, a new way of life. That's where you come in." Lucas nodded slowly. It was clear now that this wasn't just a request. It was a plea. She wasn't asking for a partner in the way a human might seek a companion. She was asking for a lifeline. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll do what I can. But I still don't know what nesting means for me." Thysaira studied him, carefully, as though measuring his every word. "You will learn," she said. "In time." As they stood in the clearing, surrounded by the unfamiliar beauty of this alien world, Lucas couldn't help but wonder how this strange partnership would unfold. But one thing was certain, His life would never be the same again. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an orange hue over the alien world as Lucas followed Thaisara through the dense forest. Every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into a strange new reality where everything was unfamiliar. The trees were massive, their bark resembling smooth, dark stone, while the leaves shimmered with colors he had never seen before. The air felt thick with the scent of strange flowers and the occasional sound of distant creatures that scurried away at their approach. Thaisara walked with a natural grace despite her towering frame, and Lucas couldn't help but be amazed by her strength and poise. She was a force of nature, unyielding yet strangely gentle in her movements. As they made their way through the forest, she occasionally glanced at him, her glowing eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and determination. "What do you want me to do?" Lucas asked again, his voice breaking the silence. He had asked the question before, but each time he tried to understand, it felt like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. Thaisara stopped in her tracks and turned to face him, her expression serious. "You will learn what it means to survive. Here," she said, "and in return, I will teach you my ways. You must understand the land, the creatures, and the balance that once existed. If we are to succeed, we must work together." Lucas nodded, trying to absorb everything she was telling him. The weight of the situation was starting to settle in. He had come to this planet on a simple mission to collect resources, but now he was being thrust into something much larger, something that involved the survival of an entire species. The idea felt overwhelming, yet there was a part of him that couldn't help but feel a strange connection to the alien hunter before him. They walked for what felt like hours, the silence between them only broken by the occasional sound of Thaisara's voice explaining the flora and fauna around them. The land was wild and untamed, but there was beauty in its chaos. Strange creatures darted between the trees, their movements fast and unpredictable. In the distance, Lucas could hear the sounds of something large moving through the underbrush. Finally, Thaisara stopped in a small clearing. A strange tree stood at the center, its bark a shimmering blue that pulsed with energy. It was unlike anything Lucas had ever seen. The tree seemed to hum, as if alive in a way that he couldn't understand. "This is the heart of our land," Thaisara said, her voice soft. "The tree sustains us. It is the source of our power, our strength, but it is dying, and with it my people." Lucas stepped closer to the tree, his curiosity piqued. "What happened to it?" Thaisara looked at him, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "The balance was broken. We hunted too much, took too much, and now the land cannot support us. The creatures that once lived here have disappeared, and the tree, it is slowly fading." Lucas took a deep breath, trying to process the gravity of her words. He had heard stories of ecosystems collapsing, of species going extinct, but to witness it firsthand was something entirely different. The land before him seemed like it was on the edge of life and death, and the burden of saving it felt heavier with each passing second. Thaisara's voice broke through his thoughts. "That is why I need you, human," she said. "You can bring change. Your kind is adaptable. You have survived on many worlds in many different environments. We cannot do this alone." Lucas looked at the alien, her plea evident in her eyes. He could see the desperation behind her calm exterior. She wasn't just asking for help. She was offering him a chance to be part of something much greater. The question still echoed in his mind. What did it mean to nest with her? "Tell me more about what this nesting really means," Lucas said, his voice steady. "What do you expect from me?" Thaisara's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, she seemed almost vulnerable. "Nesting is more than just surviving together," she explained. "It is a bond, a partnership. In my species, we do not form bonds lightly. We choose those who we believe can help us thrive. We do not have time for weakness. Lucas nodded slowly, his mind trying to piece together the puzzle. So, it's not just about surviving here, he said. It's about something deeper, something that will help your species survive. Exactly, Tessera said, her voice firm once again. Nesting means that we become partners in more than just survival. It means that together we can rebuild. My people have forgotten what it means to be strong. We've relied too long on the old ways. But you have something. We do not. A strength that can't be measured in the same way. Lucas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't sure he was ready to shoulder this responsibility. The weight of what she was asking him to do felt immense. Yet, there was a part of him that felt connected to this strange alien species. He saw the same drive for survival in her that he had seen in humanity countless times before. "What do you want me to do now?" he asked, his voice a little more determined. Tessera stepped closer, her towering figure casting a long shadow over him. "You will begin by learning. I will show you how we hunt, how we gather, and how we survive. You must learn to live with the land just as we have, and in return, I will share what I know." Lucas met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. He was stepping into a world he didn't understand, a world where the stakes were higher than anything he had ever known. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made him want to try. There was a fire in her, a determination that matched his own. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "I'll do it. I'll stay. I'll learn." Tessera's eyes brightened, and for the first time, Lucas saw a true sense of approval in her gaze. "Good," she said, her voice carrying a sense of finality. "The journey will not be easy, but together, we will survive." As the two of them stood in the clearing, the strange tree humming softly between them, Lucas realized that he was no longer just a visitor on this alien world. He was part of something much bigger, something that could change the fate of an entire species. And though the path ahead was uncertain, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to face it alone. The following days felt like a blur to Lucas. He had agreed to stay, to learn, but every moment in this alien world was a challenge. The strange land around him seemed to shift as he spent more time in it, its dangers and mysteries unfolding before him like a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. But one thing was clear. Tessera was not just a powerful alien hunter. She was determined to teach him, to show him what it meant to survive here, and in some strange way, to understand her people. Every morning they would rise before the sun and make their way through the dense forest. Lucas struggled to keep up at first, the thick vines and harsh terrain proving difficult to navigate. But with each step, he grew more accustomed to the land. Tessera, always ahead, would occasionally turn to check on him, her glowing eyes watching him closely. She didn't speak much, but her presence was constant, a reminder that he was not alone in this alien world. One morning, after a particularly long trek, they arrived at a small river. The water was crystal clear, flowing gently over smooth stones. At the edge of the river, a large, strange creature lay sunning itself, its body covered in scales that shimmered like jewels. The creature had long, spindly legs and an almost serpentine body, but its face was gentle, its eyes wide and peaceful. Lucas stopped in his tracks, amazed at the sight. He had never seen a creature like this before. It seemed peaceful, even docile, despite its strange appearance. Tessera stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the creature. "This is a Kailara," she said, her voice soft. "A creature of the river. We once hunted them for food, but now they are protected. The land can no longer sustain the hunting we once did." Lucas nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The Kailara was beautiful, But he knew that if this was the new reality, something had to change. They couldn't keep taking from the land as they had before. He looked at the creature again, feeling a strange sense of connection. It wasn't just the alien world he was learning to navigate, it was the idea of balance, of living in harmony with everything around him. "We must learn to live without destroying," Thyssera continued. "That is part of what you must teach me, the ways of your people." Lucas's mind raced. He didn't know how to explain it to her. Humanity had made its fair share of mistakes, but it had also found ways to adapt, to learn from the past. The challenge of survival was different on Earth, but the lesson was the same. It was about balance, taking only what was necessary and protecting the future. "I understand," he said quietly, though he wasn't entirely sure how he could help. "But I don't know if I can change everything for your people. I can only show you what I know." Thyssera turned to face him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Then show me," she said. "If you truly want to help, you must prove that you understand. This land, these creatures, they are not just food. They are part of the balance." Lucas's heart pounded. He had expected to face many challenges on this planet, but nothing like this. He wasn't just learning to survive. He was learning to change the way an entire species thought about survival. He took a deep breath and turned his attention back to the Kalara. Its peaceful presence reminded him of something back home, the forests, the animals, the earth that had always been his home. He knelt by the river's edge, careful not to disturb the creature. "We need to understand nature, not take from it," he said, his voice steady but unsure. "We need to learn its rhythms, respect its boundaries." Thyssera watched him carefully, her glowing eyes flickering with interest. For the first time since they had met, she said nothing. She simply observed. Lucas felt a sense of calm wash over him as he sat beside the river, watching the Kalara and listening to the soft gurgling of the water. The moment was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time he felt a connection to the alien world. The forest wasn't just a place of danger, it was a place of life, of potential. If he could just figure out how to unlock its secrets, maybe there was hope for Thyssera's people after all. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, Thyssera finally spoke again. "You are right," she said. "It is not just about survival. It is about understanding the land. I will learn, but you must learn to hunt too." The words caught Lucas by surprise. "Hunt? But didn't you just say—" "Hunting is not just killing," Thyssera interrupted, her voice firm. "It is a part of life. We must learn to hunt, but we must also learn to do it in harmony with the land. We must take only what is necessary. If we do not hunt, we will starve, but if we hunt recklessly, we will destroy ourselves." Lucas felt the weight of her words settle deep within him. He had never thought about hunting in such a way. It wasn't just about survival. It was about balance, about making sure that the land and its creatures could continue to thrive. "Okay," he said, finally understanding. "I'll help you. I'll learn to hunt with you, but we'll do it the right way." Thyssera nodded, her expression softening, for the first time in what felt like days. "Good. Together we will learn what it means to live in harmony." The next morning they set out again, this time with a new sense of purpose. Thyssera led the way, showing Lucas how to track the creatures that roamed the forest, how to understand the signs of the land, and how to make use of what was necessary without overstepping. He learned quickly, finding a strange sense of satisfaction in each step, in each new lesson. But even as they hunted, the weight of their mission loomed large in Lucas's mind. He wasn't just hunting to survive, he was hunting to teach Thyssera's people a new way of life, a way of living that could save not only them, but the planet itself. And that, more than anything, was a responsibility he hadn't expected but couldn't turn away from. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a soft, golden glow, Lucas knew that this was just the beginning. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was a path he was ready to walk. For the first time since arriving on this strange world, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The days passed by in a blur of learning and adapting. Lucas felt his bond with the alien world deepening with each passing moment. The once overwhelming and strange environment had slowly become familiar. The challenges of survival were still present, but now they seemed more like tests. Tests that he and Thyssera could face together. The forest, with its dense foliage and hidden dangers, was no longer an enemy. It was simply a part of the world, a world that required understanding, patience, and respect. As they hunted and gathered together, Lucas began to notice the subtle rhythms of the land, the way the trees swayed in the wind, how the animals moved in patterns, and the gentle hum of life beneath the surface. There was a balance, a delicate balance that had been disrupted long ago, but still existed if one knew how to see it. One evening, after a particularly long trek through the forest, they arrived at a high ridge overlooking a wide valley. The valley stretched for miles, its edges lined with jagged mountains in the distance. The air was thin at this height, and the sun had already begun to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The world below looked peaceful, almost serene, but Lucas knew that the calmness was deceiving. He had seen the signs of the land's decline, the dying trees, the lack of animals, the strange silence that often hung in the air. Thyssera stood beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. She seemed lost in thought, her usual confidence tempered by a quiet sadness. Lucas glanced at her, noticing the way her posture had changed. She wasn't just the fierce hunter anymore. She was a leader who was grappling with the fate of her people. "We've come a long way," Lucas said quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. "But we're still not there yet. There's so much to fix." Thyssera turned her head to look at him, her gaze steady. "You are right," she said, her voice softer than usual. "We have learned much, but there is more to understand, more to rebuild." Lucas felt the weight of her words. They had been working together for weeks now, hunting, gathering, learning to live in harmony with the land. But it was clear that their task was far from simple. The land was dying, and there was only so much they could do on their own. The bond they were forming was important, but it was only a small part of the larger picture. "I don't know how much more I can teach you," Lucas said, his words filled with hesitation. "I'm just one person. I can show you what I know, but I'm not sure it's enough to save everything." Thyssera studied him carefully, her eyes flickering with something Lucas couldn't quite read. "You think it is not enough because you do not yet understand," she said slowly. "There is a reason I chose you, human. You have something my people do not." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Thyssera's voice was barely above a whisper as she spoke again. "The Thyssera have always relied on strength, on physical might, on hunting, on dominating the land. But that strength is fading. Our power is not enough to save us. It is your people's resilience, your ability to adapt, to change, that makes you valuable." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to say something like that. The human race wasn't known for being strong in the traditional sense, not compared to creatures like Thyssera. But what they lacked in physical strength, they made up for in innovation, in survival. Humanity had always adapted, found new ways to overcome challenges. "Was that what she meant?" Thyssera continued, her voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "Your people have learned to live with the land, to use its resources without taking too much. You have learned to grow, to evolve. That is what we need. Not just a mate, but a partner, a guide." Lucas was taken aback by her words. He had never thought of himself as a guide, let alone a partner to an entire alien species. He was just a human explorer, someone sent to gather resources. But as he looked at Thyssera, standing beside him with her glowing eyes and strong posture, he understood what she was asking. She wasn't just asking for help, she was asking for a new way of thinking, a new way of surviving. "I never thought about it like that," Lucas said quietly. "But I still don't know if I'm the right person for this. I'm just one man." "You are more than just one man," Thyssera said firmly. "You are a symbol of what we need, a new way, a new future." Lucas stood there, taking in her words. He didn't know if he was ready for the responsibility she was placing on him, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. If he left, he would never know what could have been. The future of an entire species was at stake, and the choices they made now would determine whether they survived or perished. After a long silence, Lucas spoke again. "Okay, I'll stay. I'll help you and I'll help your people. But we'll need more than just the two of us. We'll need to find a way to bring others in, to share what we've learned." Thyssera nodded. "Yes, you understand now. This is just the beginning, the first step in something much bigger." They stood in silence for a few moments, the soft wind carrying the scent of the forest through the air. The sun had nearly set, and the sky was now a deep purple, dotted with stars. The vast valley below seemed to stretch endlessly, a reminder of the world they were trying to save. "You're not alone in this," Thyssera said softly, her voice barely above the sound of the wind. "We will do this together. For the land. For my people. For the future." Lucas nodded, feeling a sense of determination settle in his chest. He had come to this planet to collect resources, to do a job. But now he was part of something much bigger, a mission to save an entire species, to change the future of a dying world. The weight of the task ahead was heavy, but he wasn't alone. He had Thyssera, and together they would find a way to survive. The days blurred into weeks as Lucas continued his work with Thyssera. They had become more than just teacher and student, more than just two beings trying to survive on a dying world. They were partners now, working together to find a solution, to rebuild a world that was on the brink of collapse. Each day they learned from each other. The lessons were hard, the challenges often overwhelming, but there was a sense of purpose that kept them going. The weight of the task ahead felt heavy, but Lucas knew one thing for certain. They couldn't give up now. The forest had started to feel like home. The dense trees that once seemed threatening now felt familiar. Lucas had learned the signs of the land, the way the creatures moved, the patterns of the plants, the shifts in the air that indicated a storm was coming. Each lesson felt like a small victory, and with each victory, he felt more connected to the planet. One morning, after a night of heavy rain, Lucas and Thyssera stood on a high ridge once again, overlooking the valley below. The storm had passed, and the world was still. The air was fresh, the ground slick with moisture. The sky was a soft blue, the sun just beginning to rise. It was the kind of morning that made Lucas feel like anything was possible. "This place, it's beautiful," Lucas said, his voice soft as he gazed out at the landscape. Thyssera stood beside him, her tall frame outlined against the horizon. "Yes," she said quietly, "but beauty can only last if we protect it." Lucas nodded. He had learned that lesson over and over again in the past weeks. Survival wasn't just about taking what was needed. It was about giving back, about understanding the delicate balance of life and death. The Kaelara, the creatures they had once hunted, were thriving now, their population growing slowly but steadily. The plants were beginning to bloom again, the trees showing signs of life in places that had once been barren. "I think we've done more than just survive here," Lucas said, turning to face Thyssera. "I think we've begun to heal." She looked at him, her glowing eyes bright in the early morning light. We have, but there is still much to do. Lucas felt the weight of her words. He had always known that this was just the beginning. Saving one piece of the world, one part of the ecosystem, wasn't enough. It was a start, but it wasn't the end. They needed to reach out, to spread what they had learned to others. Thesera's people had to change, had to see the land not as something to conquer, but as something to protect. How do we do that? Lucas asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. How do we teach your people to live differently? They've always been hunters. It's what they know. We start small, Thesera said, her voice steady. We begin with the ones who are willing to listen. Those who understand that survival doesn't mean domination. The others will follow when they see the change, when they see the land healing. Lucas nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. They had made a start, but it wasn't enough. The changes they had made in this part of the forest, in their small corner of the world, couldn't remain isolated. If Thesera's people were to survive, they needed to embrace the change on a larger scale. They needed to adapt. I'll help you, Lucas said, his voice firm. We'll find a way to make them see. Thesera turned to him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if considering his words. You will need patience. Change is never easy. But if anyone can do it, it is you. Lucas felt a surge of determination. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for a future where Thesera's people could live in harmony with the land, where they could thrive without destroying the very world that sustained them. It was a daunting task, but he couldn't turn away now. The next few days were spent preparing. Lucas and Thesera traveled to different parts of the land, speaking to small groups of Thesera's people, showing them the changes they had made, teaching them the lessons they had learned. It was slow work. Many of the Thesera were resistant, unwilling to accept the idea of changing their ways. But there were others who listened, who saw the value in what they were doing, and with each new person they convinced, the hope for the future grew. One evening, as they sat around a small fire, Lucas looked at Thesera. The flickering flames cast shadows across her face, making her seem both fierce and vulnerable at the same time. He had seen her strength over the past weeks, but it was moments like this, when they were alone, when the weight of the world seemed to fall away, that he saw her humanity. She wasn't just a leader. She was someone who had lived through loss, through failure, and was now trying to build something better. I never thought I'd be part of something like this, Lucas said quietly, his eyes fixed on the fire. I came here to gather resources to do my job, but now I feel like I'm part of something bigger, something that matters. Thesera looked at him, her eyes soft. You are, she said. You are part of something that will last. Lucas smiled, feeling a sense of pride well up inside him. He wasn't just helping a single species survive. He was helping to rebuild a world, to create a future where both humans and Thesera could live together, side by side, in balance with the land. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was worth fighting for. As the fire crackled between them, Lucas felt a deep sense of peace. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but he was no longer alone. He had Thesera, and together they would find a way to save her world. The stars above them seemed brighter that night, as if the universe itself was watching over them, waiting for the next chapter of their story to unfold. And for the first time since arriving on this strange planet, Lucas felt a sense of hope. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed within reach.